welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Friday, March 29th. China calls for calm as North Korea issues further threats against the US. The US Chamber of Commerce issues new findings about data theft of companies in China. And a look at just what the BRICS Development Bank may achieve. Recent footage from North Korean media is showing leader Kim Jong-un ready to fight, and with US nuclear stealth bombers flying over the Korean Peninsula, Chinese authorities are looking to quickly cool the tension on both sides.
It seems that decades after it ended, one remaining ember could still make the Cold War hot. Earlier today, North Korean media released a slew of images of Kim Jong-un attending what was reported to be an emergency military meeting. Missile units are being put on standby after promises to hit U.S. military bases in South Korea, Guam, and even the U.S. mainland. The U.S. is also sending a clear message to Pyongyang. Yesterday, 2 stealth B-2 Spirit bombers, capable of delivering a nuclear payload, performed drills over South Korea. It was a clear demonstration of U.S. military might. The bombers flew from the United States and back in a single flight. According to the U.S. military, it was to demonstrate the ability to conduct long-range precision strikes quickly and at will. North Korea, on the other hand, maintains a mostly leftover Soviet arsenal. That's dangerous for South Korea. The short-range Scud missile is easily capable of hitting targets anywhere in its southern neighbor, but their long-range weapons have never been tested, though in theory they could hit U.S. bases in the Pacific. China is calling for both sides to cool down. Beijing finds itself in a tricky diplomatic dilemma. While overtly supporting UN sanctions, the Chinese regime has reason to ensure the continued survival of North Korea. A collapse would send a flood of refugees into China. It could also result in unified Korea as a major ally of the West on its borders. But as North Korea becomes more aggressive, that means more advanced U.S. military tech off China's shores, and that could pose a challenge to Chinese ambitions in the East and South China Seas.
The UN Security Council voted today to use its troops for an offensive mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As a member of the Security Council, China has also backed the resolution after previously opposing measures like this.
China backed a UN Security Council resolution today to deploy offensive troops to the Democratic Republic of Congo. The resolution came after other African nations asked the UN for help in controlling armed rebel militia that have threatened stability and the safety of citizens in and around the Congo. The Chinese regime has been reluctant to support any move that would be seen as interference in other countries' affairs or would threaten sovereignty. But after the UN Security Council stated this would be an exceptional case, not precedent for the future, China agreed.
China agrees to the deployment of an intervention brigade within MONUSCO as an exceptional case. Under the terms of this resolution, the deployment of this intervention brigade doesn't constitute any precedent, nor does it affect the United Nations' continued adherence to the 3 peacekeeping principles.
The mandate will use the almost 2,000 MONUSCO forces that are already stationed there with an initial expiration date of 1 year. MONUSCO is the UN peacekeeping force in Congo. Traditionally, the UN restricts its troops from using force except in self-defense. While this has helped the UN to remain neutral, critics also point out that it has limited its effectiveness. Li Baodong said in a statement that China supports the mission to end the conflict in the region, but called for a return to the principles of non-interference and impartiality by UN forces once this is done.
More bad news for U.S. companies dealing with cybersecurity. Responding to a survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in China, 26% of U.S. firms in China said they've been victims of data theft. The survey is in line with a report by U.S. security company Mandiant, who says that more than 100 U.S. firms have been targeted by Chinese hackers. Mandiant concludes that the attacks emanated from the Chinese army and are aimed at gathering trade secrets. The Chamber of Commerce survey also revealed a growing mistrust of Chinese IT. Only 10% surveyed said they'll use China-based cloud computing services, mainly because of security concerns. And besides the financial loss incurred by intellectual property theft, 62% said their businesses have been impeded by blocked internet searches. The Chamber surveyed 325 firms throughout China late last year, before the Mandiant report came out. US wireless carrier Sprint and Japan's SoftBank have agreed to not include equipment made by China's Huawei in Sprint's network, the chairman of the US House Intelligence, Mike Rogers, said on Thursday. SoftBank wants to buy 70% of Sprint for $20 billion, but the deal needs approval by US regulators first. U.S. Representative Mike Rogers said the two companies pledged they will not use equipment made by Huawei. Existing Huawei products in Clearwire's network will also be phased out. Sprint is in the process of acquiring Clearwire. There have been growing security concerns in the U.S. about equipment made by Huawei. The world's second-largest telecommunications gear maker has been tied to the Chinese military. Last October, the House Intelligence Committee issued a report discouraging U.S. companies from using equipment made by Huawei and another Chinese telecom equipment maker, ZTE. SoftBank's purchase of Sprint needs to be approved by the U.S. Committee on Foreign Investment. The Japanese company uses Huawei and ZTE equipment in its own network. The deal was deferred in January by the Justice Department, citing national security risks. The new BRICS Development Bank is raising speculation about what this institution means for the world economy. Chinese leader Xi Jinping traveled to Africa this week, where he attended the 5th BRICS Annual Summit. China is supporting the bank, which came about to safeguard against fluctuations in Western economies.
At the annual BRICS Summit this week in South Africa, Chinese leader Xi Jinping gave his blessing to the start of a new BRICS Development Bank. The group of BRICS nations is made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, all economic powerhouses shaping the world's economy. The question now is, what type of role will BRICS countries play in the world economy, and what is the place of this new bank? An economist at Columbia University thinks the development bank will serve a niche not filled by existing institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
Particularly for the developing nations, particularly for Latin America and Africa, who depend very strongly and unhappily on the IMF and the World Bank. This now becomes an alternative.
But she says the role that China is playing in developing nations has set a bad precedent, something she hopes the new bank will not follow.
China is starting to play a colonialistic power role in Africa and Latin America. 70% of the exports of Latin America are raw materials. In the year 2012, 90 or more % in Africa. And guess who is the biggest trading partner, the biggest importer of natural resources from Latin America? China.
Some rights groups are wary that the new bank will provide funding, but not require stipulations on things like better human rights and environmental protection. One researcher at the Overseas Development Institute says that strings-free funding is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as the money is used in a responsible way.
Countries end up doing things because the donors are telling them to, because they feel they need to jump through the hoops to get the cash. But actually what they really need is development that suits their own strategies and their own priorities, because we know that that's the best way to use aid successfully in the long run.
The World Bank said in a statement that it is supportive of the new bank and looks forward to working with it to alleviate poverty and raise prosperity in the developing world. The IMF was less enthusiastic, saying it was watching the development of the new bank with interest. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
And coming up after the break, U.S. transplant surgeons listen to findings on forced organ harvesting in China. The Dalai Lama expresses optimism for Xi Jinping, and Shen Yun shows the divine world in Switzerland. And welcome back. The University of Pittsburgh's Medical Center has one of the leading transplant institutes in the world. It provides consultation and training for transplant surgeons around the world, but some have urged it to reconsider training surgeons from China, and that's because of claims that Chinese state-run hospitals have been killing prisoners of conscience for their organs.
U.S. transplant surgeons say there needs to be more awareness about transplant abuse inside China. Medical rights group Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting hosted a forum on Thursday at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. They presented findings on state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting in China.
Ethan Gutman, journalist and award-winning author, estimated that over 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners have been murdered for their organs by the Chinese Communist Party.
Falun Gong is a Chinese spiritual practice. Since 1999, the communist regime has waged a persecution campaign against its practitioners. In 2006, claims surfaced that practitioners detained in prison and labor camps are being killed for their organs. Former Canadian lawmaker David Kilgour and Canadian lawyer David Matas were the first to carry out an in-depth investigation into the claims. They found a big discrepancy between the sudden increase in transplants in China since 1999 and the lack of official explanation for where those organs came from. They concluded that Chinese state-run hospitals were in fact using Falun Gong practitioners and other prisoners of conscience as a source for organs.
Well, it's like Mr. Mattis said, the numbers don't add up. Somewhere these organs are coming from, and they need to be accounted for. And I think the international community needs to understand where those organs are coming from.
The Thomas E. Starzl Transplantation Institute at UPMC is at the forefront of the organ transplant industry. It provides training for surgeons from around the world, including China.
There's got to be common knowledge that a lot of the surgeons that they are training or the training that they're providing both here and in China has to be associated with this.
Dr. Christopher Hughes says the UMPC will be discussing how to deal with visiting surgeons from China.
Everybody, any transplant physician, any transplant personnel is against this. I mean, this should never happen. I mean, we're surprised that it's happening. There's no doubt about it. It just should never happen. And it should be stopped.
The Chinese regime openly admits to using executed prisoners as a source of organs, but has denied using prisoners of conscience. The regime, however, has so far not refuted the specific evidence raised in the reports by Kilgour and Matas. NTD News, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
The whole world has been weighing in on how China will change or not change with Xi Jinping now at the helm. And now the Dalai Lama, someone with a very vested interest in political changes in China, speaks out about his hopes for the future.
How will Xi Jinping rule China? It's a question on everyone's mind, and the exiled spiritual leader of Tibet is no different. Speaking to reporters earlier today, the Dalai Lama said he was optimistic.
So the leadership have to act according to new reality. So therefore, I think overall, I'm optimistic. Things are changing. But it is not sort of practical or realistic, something or big change come immediately. That's, I think, unrealistic.
Since 2009, over 100 Tibetans have self-immolated to protest oppression by the Chinese regime. The Dalai Lama says China can be a major world player, but only if change comes.
So you see, China can take, I think, significant constructive role on the planet. So in order to carry constructive sort of role more effectively, trust and respect from the rest of the world is very, very essential. For that reason, transparency is very, very crucial factor. Closed society is very harmful.
But for all the Dalai Lama's willingness to discuss and engage Chinese leaders, their view of the Dalai Lama is unambiguous. The spiritual leader, exiled in 1959, is officially considered a violent separatist and enemy of the regime.
A divine world, that's what audiences in Switzerland said after watching a performance of Shen Yun Performing Arts. The New York-based classical Chinese dance company is currently touring Europe on a mission to revive China's 5,000 years of heavenly-inspired culture.
Shen Yun Performing Arts held its last show in Lausanne, Switzerland, performing to a full house. Even the extra seats were completely sold out. Theatre personnel said that this was a rare occurrence, so they wanted to know what Shen Yun is all about.
It makes me aspire to become a better person, to show more kindness to people, more patience. And if I feel that around me there's somebody maybe who needs a helping hand and I feel I can provide it, I wouldn't hesitate. This is what I feel when I see a show like this, just to be able to listen to my heart, I would say. Let my heart show me the direction. Not so much my mind, but my heart.
Daniel Brillard, the mayor of the city Lausanne, saw the show for a second time.
C'est vraiment un festival de couleurs.
It really is a festival of colors. The special effects are really well used. It has what is typical in traditional culture, a permanent connection with the heaven and the divine. In addition, it has a lot of male and female dancers who are extremely well coordinated.
J'ai l'impression que je suis dans un monde divin.
I have the impression that I am in a divine world, wonderful, almost unreal, with colors, inner heat that I feel really strong.
Fort, mais vraiment fort intérieurement. J'ai vécu une soirée,
but really strongly within me. It was an extraordinary evening, incredible, and I can really tell to the people who haven't seen this show to go watch it, because it's really something extraordinary. I had an immense pleasure. It is really captivating. I think I have some difficulties to really express myself, to say all the joy that I felt.
Je pense que je n'arrive pas à trouver les termes vraiment pour m'exprimer, pour dire toute la joie que j'ai eue, tout le ressenti.
It's too vast to put in several words, but I would recommend it to all the people I know. Everybody I know who's on a spiritual path, or everybody whom I know who loves beauty and art should come and see this. That's what I would say now.
Shen Yun moves on to Germany, playing 4 shows in Frankfurt over the Easter holidays.
And that's all for this broadcast of NTD China News. For more of our China-related content, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our YouTube channel, NTD on China. Coming up next is Discovering China. Stay tuned.